Alright folks, so what we're going to do today is we're going to get you started with how to set up and install what you need to get your first program going. So what you're going to need in order to get that done is you're going to need to download and install some sort of interpreter for Python. Now you may recall when we talked about, if you watch these videos in order that is, you would find that Python is an interpreted language, and as opposed to compiled language, an interpreted language means that you have to have the source code open and available to run it. So there are a number of tools that you can utilize to write Python code. The one we're going to use in this course is idle. Idle is a free interpreter. It's also cross-platform, so if you're a Mac user, you're a Linux user, Windows user, it doesn't matter. You can get the same effect on all three operating systems. And the other thing is it's going to be a very simple tool, so the advantage is you don't have to worry about stuff that you're really not going to use in an early intro to programming course. So you'll see that this is available at python.org, and I'll have a link to that in the description. And you'll see there's a link to downloads. The version really doesn't matter all that much. Again, for an intro course, if you're doing stuff that's a little more cutting edge, it might be a little more important to you. At the moment, this is July of 2020. We're looking at Python 3.8.3, but I'm sure whatever version you download will be fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click download and save this. And what I'll then have to do is install it. Doesn't really matter what web browser you use to download it. But you'll see that I'm going to install it. I'm just going to kind of leave the default options here. So you can see install for all users. You don't really have to worry about adding it to the path unless you're kind of a more power user. You should just be able to go in and click install now, and magic happens. So once this completes installing, and it really should not take that long, as you can see, this is probably going to go under a minute or so. What I will then be able to do is I'll be able to run Python idle. So if I go to my start menu, you'll now see that idle does show up there. And when we run this, it's just going to pop up with this very basic looking window. Now there's going to be a couple things that I do want to caution you on. The first thing is when you go to write your programs, the first thing you need to do is you need to go to the file menu and say select new file. This shell right here that you see on the screen, the shell is going to allow you to make some changes or test some code and see if it works, but it's not really a spot where you would write a complete program. And for what you're doing in this class, you're going to need to write complete programs. So that's why you see you want to go, once again, that's file and new file. And at that point, you would then be able to save that and put that in whatever folder you might want. So in this case, I'm just going to put it in my downloads folder. And, give it a name so you know what it is, of course. Now, what I'm going to show you very briefly, we will come back to this. I just kind of want to show a couple things here, is that at this point, you would be able to issue whatever commands that you might know in order to make a program run. So you could see, for example, I've typed in a command here. Again, I'll do a further video on this. But at this point, I can go to the Run menu and select Run, or you'll notice the shortcut is F5. So I tend to be a little more of a shortcut person. Now you will notice that the little star up here next to the test.py name, that indicates that this file has not been saved since I last changed it. So when I run this, it will prompt me, are you sure that you, or do you want to save? And I'll say yes. And at this point, we've got a very basic program that just prints out hello and then ends. And I promise it gets a little more complex than that. Now, one other thing that I will point out is notice that if I close out of idle and I just double click on test.py, if you watch very closely, you'll see a little black window pops up and goes away. And the reason is because Python is set up when it is installed, specifically idle is set up this way, that when you double click on a program, it's going to run it rather than allow you to edit it, which is probably not what you want. So I'm going to, if I want to edit this in the future, I would go into idle and I could look for my recent files, and you'll see I have some files there from other assignments. And if I go back to downloads, you'll see there's the file. And then, of course, I can make changes and say, so now it's going to print goodbye. All right. We'll get you further, I promise. So the other thing is, you'll find that with some school email servers, they're very fussy about Python files because they are computer programs. They can cause, they can be used for malicious purposes. They can be, viruses can be written in Python. So if you were to email this to your professor, a lot of times you may find that it gets blocked by the mail server. We have that problem at our school. If you're not one of my students and you're just kind of viewing this on YouTube, it may happen to you. So this is why I would require stuff submitted in Blackboard. But if you are having problems sending it to your instructor, usually a pretty sneaky way around this is that you are able to right-click and send this to a compressed or zipped folder. And then if you attach that zip folder to an email, it should work. It's kind of a way to get around things a little bit. So basically, in order to do what we're going to talk about in future videos, you're going to need to install idle. You're going to need to create a new file, give it a name, and then from that point forward, you would issue whatever commands you are looking for. So hopefully, this gets you to the point where you become a programmer. Our next goal is to make you a better programmer than just somebody who has installed idle. So that's our next goal. So hopefully you've learned something here. You get this installed and you should be able to work on programs from here on forward. Again, it's free, installed on multiple devices, and play around with it, explore it a little bit.